The Secret Story of Hin. Chapter 8. Hin's Breaking Point. Mississippi was in turmoil as tensions surrounding slavery grew. Cotton was king, and plantations like the Jones Plantation thrived on human suffering. In Natchez, Mississippi, the forks of the road market continued to be one of the largest slave trading hubs in the South, its horrors fueling plantations far and wide. Meanwhile, whispers of rebellion and abolitionist movements persisted, striking fear into the hearts of the oppressors. Hin's world fractured the day Lucky George's whip tore into old Joseph. The sun loomed high, a merciless tyrant, branding the fields with searing heat. Joseph, a man who had carried the weight of generations on his back, faltered beneath a sack far too heavy for his frail frame. His knees buckled, his breath rattling in his chest like the last gasps of a dying drum. Useless old mule Lucky George's voice rang out, dripping with contempt, each syllable another blow. The whip followed a sharp crack that split the air like a thunderclap. It struck with such ferocity that Joseph screamed, a guttural cry that seemed to rise from the depths of his soul. The leather ripped through his shirt and into his flesh, tearing open deep gashes that oozed blood, dark and glistening under the unforgiving sun. He collapsed fully, his face grinding into the dirt that had been both his torment and his graveyard for hope. His trembling hands clawed weakly at the soil, but his body refused. Hin stood paralyzed, his hoe slipping soundlessly from his fingers. A storm surged within him, a white-hot rage that seared his veins and blurred his vision. His fists clenched so tightly that his nails pierced his palms, blood dripping onto the earth. This wasn't just cruelty, it was desecration. Joseph wasn't merely a man, he was a griot, the sacred keeper of their past. He was one of the rare few who had survived the Middle Passage as an adult. Most of the men and women who fought back home died with shackles on their wrists or steel buried in their flesh. Their resistance met with muskets and fire. The slavers didn't want them. Their bodies were too strong, their minds too fixed in freedom. It was the children they craved. Children could be bent before they ever learned to stand tall. They could be stripped of language, of memory of self. Boys who once ran free in the sun were beaten into obedience, their backs carved with the lessons of submission. Girls barely old enough to braid their hair were forced into a womanhood that reeked of sweat and violation. On the ships, the adults who remained were examples left just long enough to be broken in front of their children, their screams a warning of what rebellion would bring. The air in the hold stank of fear, piss, and rotting bodies, the sound of chains rattling like a death song. Those who lived were not the strongest, but the ones fate had cursed to endure. Every scar on his body told a story, every word from his lips a piece of their shattered culture. Joseph had whispered forbidden songs to the children under the moonlight and shared tales of kingdoms far away, where their ancestors had ruled with dignity and power. He was the fragile thread holding their history together, and George had frayed it with each lash of his whip. This was the final straw. That night, the plantation slept under a heavy shroud of silence, unaware that its end was already unfolding. Hin slipped into the tool shed, the dim glow of a single lantern casting flickering shadows across the faces of his chosen allies. "We can't let this continue," he began, his voice low but resolute. "We strike now," Hin said, his voice as cold as the steel blade in his hand. "If we wait, we die broken. If we fight, we die free, or we live to see them burn." Patwa, the kitchen girl with eyes sharp as broken glass, leaned forward and nodded, and with pure determination, said they'll never see it coming. Michael, his hands scarred from years of hard labor, crossed his arms. They'll hang us all. You know that, right? All of us? They're already killing us." Elias growled, his massive fists clenching at his sides. "At least this way, we take them with us." Hin set his jaw. "And we don't fail." Hin's gaze burned as it swept over them. "We fight, and we win. We give them nothing but the hell they've earned." The Jones Plantation Grand Gala loomed, a grotesque display of opulence and power. Masters, mistresses, and overseers from neighboring plantations would gather to revel in their shared cruelty. Him had spent days planning, every detail calculated for maximum devastation. In the kitchen, Potwell worked with the precision of a surgeon, crushing belladonna berries into a deadly paste. Her movements were calm, unhurried, as she stirred the poison into the simmering pots of stew. Him, under the guise of tending the gardens, slipped the paste into the wine cellar, letting it seep into the plantation's finest vintages. But Him's plans didn't stop there. He sowed chaos like seeds in the field, whispering to the enslaved, "They're selling us after the Grand Gala. All of us, children, elders, they'll leave no one behind," he said in hushed tones, his words laden with false urgency. "Or worse," he added, "the children will be sent to breeding farms. All those not sold will be hung, a punishment for being worthless." The lie was fire on dry grass. The slaves' simmering rage erupted into quiet, focused preparation. Weapons were hidden in hay bales, beneath floorboards, in hollowed-out logs. On the night Jones Plantation Grand Gala was an annual orgy of excess and power. Masters and mistresses draped in silks and jewels arrived in gleaming carriages, their laughter carrying over the grounds like a grotesque. Inside, the house brimmed with the clinking of glasses, the strains of violins, and the self-satisfied arrogance of people who thought themselves untouchable. Inside the kitchen, Potwell worked silently, her face a mask of calm as she ladled poisoned stew into fine china bowls. Across the room, Him moved among the guests, his posture deferential, his expression unreadable. "Here's to the Jones legacy," one declared, his wine glass gleaming under the chandelier. The poison worked quickly. Mrs. Bessie, a woman who dripped venom as easily as pearls, was the first to falter. She coughed delicately at first, then violently, her embroidered handkerchief coming away soaked with blood. Her body convulsed, her eyes bulging as her breaths came in short, desperate gasps. Around her, chaos erupted. Men and women clutched their throats, collapsing into their bowls of poisoned stew. Blood and vomit painted the elegant tablecloths as screams filled the air. Master William Thornton from the neighboring Thornton Plantation in Mississippi, which enslaved about 150 people. His death was quick. He choked on the poisoned stew, his face turning a sickly purple before he collapsed onto the grand dining table, his ornate brocade vest stained with blood and bile. Mistress Abigail Fletcher from the Fletcher Plantation in Louisiana, known for her cold, calculating demeanor and ownership of 250 slaves. She stumbled, gasping, and clawed at her throat. Her elaborate silk gown became her death shroud as she fell writhing under the grand chandelier. Overseer Thomas Blake from the Benton estate in Alabama, overseeing 190 slaves. He managed to stagger outside before the poison took full effect, collapsing in the garden where he was found twitching and foaming at the mouth. His hands, stained with the blood of countless beatings, lay lifeless among the roses. Master Edward Mallory of the Mallory Plantation in Georgia, with 400 slaves under his control. He keeled over, clutching his chest. The sound of his gasps and the sight of his gold-embroidered coat soaked with vomit, a stark contrast to the opulence of the gala. The dining hall became a slaughterhouse. Vomit, blood and spilled wine mingled on the polished floors. The air grew thick with the stench of death. He moved through the carnage, his expression unreadable. He found Mrs. Bessie writhing on the floor, her fine gown now a grotesque tangle of silk and bile. Him smiled. She reached for him, her trembling hand a silent plea. "This is for Sino," him whispered, his voice cutting through the din. With deliberate precision, and every single ounce of might he had in him, he brought his boot down with brutal force on her outstretched hand, the sickening sound of bones splintering echoing in the air. He didn't stop, grinding his heel to ensure every fragile piece was crushed beneath him. Her body convulsed violently, her final shudder as her eyes rolled back into her head. Outside, the rebellion roared to life. Elias led the charge, his massive frame smashing through overseers who stumbled from their quarters, unarmed and disoriented. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid smoke of burning fields. The overseers were dragged and beaten mercilessly. Elias's massive fists broke bones with every strike, his fury unrelenting. Lucky George's capture was a spectacle. He was dragged by a dozen slaves, his screams echoing across the night. His cries for mercy fell on deaf ears as the slaves fashioned a crude gallows. "Please, please, I beg you," Lucky George sobbed, his voice cracking. He stepped forward, meeting George's tear-streaked face with cold, unflinching eyes. "Mercy," he spat. "Did you show mercy to Joseph, to Sino, and all the little boys and girls you violated?" He made sure every last enslaved soul had their turn with Lucky George. They spit in his face, kicked him until their feet ached, slashed his skin open, and drove knives into him just deep enough to make him scream but not enough to let him die. They gave him back every ounce of the pain he had inflicted on them, every broken bone, every scar, every sob. When his cries became hoarse and his strength gave out, he stepped forward. With blooded hands and a face as cold as the grave, he pulled the rope. The firelight danced on George's lifeless body as it swayed against the inferno of the big house, his death a punctuation to the years of brutality he had unleashed. It wasn't justice, it was revenge, raw and unflinching. Old Lucky George's body swung against the backdrop of the flames, his death a grim exclamation mark on their uprising. Some of the elders started to sing a hymn, celebrating the death of old Lucky George. In the charred ruins of the big house, Michael uncovered a map. His hands trembled as he held it out to him. "Trade routes south," Michael said, his voice thick with hope. "This could lead us to Mexico." He traced the lines with his finger. Mexico, a land where slavery had been abolished, loomed on the horizon like a distant, golden dream. By dawn, the plantation was unrecognizable. The grand house was a smoldering skeleton, the fields soaked with the blood of masters and overseers. Their fine silks and brocades were torn and smeared with grime. The grand house smoldered, its opulence reduced to ash. He stood at the edge of the ruins, his once yellowish pale-skinned and blue eyes like Master Samuel, now a golden brown with hazel eyes glowing in the Mississippi morning sunrise. "Mama Calisa was right," he murmured. "The ancestors have awakened me." She once told him, "When you connect with your ancestors, you connect with your history, you connect to your people. That will unlock the melanin in your soul, giving you the strength of the sun. So rise, sunrise, rise." Before leaving, he knelt beside the ruins and whispered, "Sino, your rebellion planted this seed. Today, we harvested it. Rising," he vowed, "your name will live in every step we take toward freedom." "This is just the beginning," he said to the others. Weapons in hand, the survivors began their journey south. the stolen map tucked safely in Michael's pack. Behind them, the plantation burned, a testament to their fury. Ahead lay freedom, uncertain but tantalizing. Hin forged a path in blood, ash, and the unyielding fire of liberation. This wasn't just survival, it was war. Beside him were Potwal, Michael, Elias, and the survivors of the rebellion. That day, May 25, 1847, they freed 183 children, 464 adults, and elders. They slaughtered 46 masters, 54 mistresses, 85 overseers, and 140 enslaved helpers who had betrayed their own. One by one, the survivors disappeared into the swamp's embrace, ghosts of vengeance slipping through the trees with blood on their hands and purpose in their hearts. And as the smoke from the Jones Plantation curled high into the Mississippi sky, it didn't just mark the end of an era, it announced a reckoning. The South would remember that night not as a rebellion, but as a prophecy carved in fire and flesh. And Hin, no longer a shadow in history, was now its most dangerous truth. The enslaved could rise not just to run, but to burn it all down.
Chapter 7, Hymn's Breaking Point. Thank you for walking with us through this chapter. A story forged in pain, defiance, and the unstoppable force of Black liberation. If this chapter stirred something in you, honor that feeling, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a breath of this living, breathing truth. Speak your truth in the comments. Your voice matters. Your voice is part of the revolution. Chapter 9 is calling. Tap the link in the description to keep the journey alive. If this story lives in you, if its fire fuels you, support the mission. Cash App, My You Time. This isn't just history, it's resurrection. It's resistance. It's a reckoning. Let's keep the fire burning. Thank you, always, for walking with us.